Hi, everybody, and welcome to another TalMix broadcast. As you know, these run monthly, and the TalMix broadcast is really all about equipping our viewers with knowledge and information about the changing world of work that we find ourselves in. So today is no different, and today, given a lot of the feedback that we've had so far from some of these consultants that are planning to listen and to watch today, today is a real topic that is close to a lot of independent consultants and independent or self-employed people's hearts. And we're talking about how to market yourself as an independent worker, as an independent consultant. So we all, many of us who have done it before, we know the feeling of leaving a corporate company, leaving a brand that has traditionally opened doors for us, leaving the safety of an umbrella global brand, and having to do that all on our own, set up on our own, identify business processes on our own, and start all of that process from scratch ourselves. So today is very exciting for me because I'm joined by two fantastic panelists who have been there and done that. And we're going to be sharing some tips and some suggestions about how you can amplify your personal brand even more, and give you some ideas on where to start to build your own personal pipeline, and to really get started in developing your services as an independent consultant. So as you know, this is a live event, and if you want to communicate with us, do so on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter under We Are TalMix, at the handle We Are TalMix rather. So if you have any questions, send them through to us, and it's being recorded, so if you do miss today or you want to watch it again, you can do from our YouTube channel, and we'll make sure that the link is included in upcoming newsletters and social activity as well. So I want to get straight into the discussion today, and really to introduce our panel that's going to be speaking to us, speaking a little bit more or telling us about their personal experiences. So I'm joined by Adam Cantor, the independent consultant and director of Chalk Lane Advisory. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Katie. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good, thanks. And I'm also joined by Evangelos Gikas, who is also known as Gigs, who is the owner of Refresh Connect and recently relocated to the UK, and is also, not a stranger to leaving the corporate brand and starting a new business all on his own and developing that brand from scratch. So hi, Gigs, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, Katie. Thanks. Nice to be here.
Good. And just in 30 seconds, Adam, I wonder if you can just tell the viewers a little bit more about yourself and what you do and about your history.
Sure, Katie, not a problem at all. My background is primarily on the strategic and restructuring side of the business. I've been working as an independent consultant for about 5 years now, primarily working with high growth and sometimes distressed organizations that need assistance and need guidance on how to approach the marketplace, how to look at things slightly differently, and how to take their businesses forward into a new direction.
Awesome. That's good stuff. I mean, you're going to have a lot of good information to share with us, I'm sure. Gigs, just give us a little bit of an introduction as to who you are and what brings you to the UK as well.
Yeah, well, Katie, I spent most of my working life in the digital space and in brand or product management type positions. But I've also, in my heart, I've always been a communicator. And so I think this ultimately led me to identifying an opportunity to start a digital agency with a real niche focus on communications, and that's how Refresh Connect started. And that's what I'm hoping to talk about a little bit today.
Fantastic, awesome. So let's crack right on. Let's get started. I'm going to start with you, Adam, for a second, if that's okay. You've been there and done that. I mean, your CV speaks for yourself. You've worked for some of the biggest names in the finance industry. And when you decided to work or to take that step to work independently, what would you say was the biggest challenge that you faced with regards to establishing a new and relatively unknown personal brand?
For me, it's always come down to trust, regardless of how you want to talk about the branding, the marketing, everything that goes with it. It's whether or not that client trusts you to take care of them and deliver on in solving their problem. That's one of the reasons they often go to large organizations. They've got a name attached to them. And we all know that even these large organizations can fail on occasion, but at least someone's got an out when that happens. When they're dealing with an independent consultant, they have to then go back to their boss and say, yeah, Adam Cantor from Chalk Lane Advisory, he didn't deliver. His boss asked, well, why did you trust him in the first place? That causes more problems for them. So for me, it's building that early relationship with someone and getting them to trust you to actually keep their interests first, to tell them the hard things, and to build that long-term strategic advisor or trusted advisor position that they then feel comfortable coming to you with our problems on a regular basis. So that's kind of, for me, the core of, if you're going out there to start a new business, to build up your own brand, it's building that trust with a series of clients and people you can talk with, that they feel comfortable coming to you with their largest problems potentially.
Interesting. And Giggs, if we look at you for a second, so, within the world of consulting and even the journey that you've had, we know that the power, that well-known globally established brands hold, like, the typical consulting companies, McKinsey, Bain & Co., PwC, etc. So how, in your experience, how do independent consultants, or those people who choose to move away from the typical corporate career, move beyond that brand umbrella and ultimately help their clients move beyond that as well?
Yeah, I think I want to echo some of what Adam is saying, in that forging relationships has always been a priority for me. When the good times are good, you don't need that much. But when things are tough, and inevitably they do get tough in business, that's when you really need good, strong relationships. And that relationship extends to your customers, but also beyond. I've had the value, one of the biggest benefits I've had in the past is a really strong supplier network. A network where you feed off each other, but where you can trust as well. So it works both ways, to your customer, but also to your supplier network. And building a good relationship. There's a couple of keywords for me: trust, which Adam mentioned, but it's ultimately a win-win. It's a long-term thinking type of relationship, and these are all critical to building your personal brand and your businesses. So as an action, I'd say anybody, you have to actively go out, network, and seek to build these relationships. It's like a personal relationship. It doesn't just happen by itself. You've got to keep the flame going. So, and then I think the second thing to that for me, other than a relationship, is playing to your strengths. So these big brands, the McKinseys of the world, they've got a certain perception around them, but you can compete on other areas. So look at what advantages you have. Is it your efficiency, your cost, your speed, your agility? In the work that you deliver, but also in the opportunities that you seek. Look for those things where you are unique and where you'll easier be able to win those pitches, and also be easier be able to distinguish yourself from the bigger guys. And then I'd say lastly, it's a constant. There's no silver bullet. Constantly build your portfolio, and because you'll have to prove harder that you can do the work than any brand that's got an associated perception.
And I mean, I'm sure there's space for everybody in the world. There's space for the larger consulting companies, and it is exactly as you say. You got to find out what makes you different. And Adam, if we come to you for a second, cottoning onto what Giggs has just said, it's often said within the independent world that. And looking at a lot of the consultants I've spoken to, they try, when they first take that journey, they first take that step towards independence, they try to be the jack of all trades. They try to be something to everybody. And even some consultants that I've spoken to who have been consulting for many years still struggle to narrow down exactly what their speciality is. So what's your advice for a consultant who's trying to identify the key aspects that they need to be able to market themselves better?
And that's a very good question. I feel a lot of sympathy there, because I went through that same process when I started consulting independently as well. And I've had a rather varied background, from independent consulting to private equity to banking and whatnot. And I have touched on a lot of things in my career, but you can't sell everything to everyone. It just doesn't work. And so for me, especially when I started out, as well as kind of a regular basis, I try and treat my own marketing as a project, just like I would for another client. And so I do sit down and look at it strategically. I do a bit of analysis on myself and saying, look, these are the skills that I really do feel comfortable selling to a particular client. These are things I can do, and these are things I just really shouldn't touch at all. And that helps me personally refine my own thinking about how I'm going to market myself. And then, I try and cross-reference that with the industries that I'm interested in, target clients I might be able to touch upon. And again, I treat this as a research project, just as I would for a client, and say, look, I need to come out with an output document for myself in this case, but something that really gives me some clear sense of where do I want to go with my career. Because there's always things that I can do today, but then thinking strategically, I may want to shift industries as things change and evolve. I may want to learn new skills as industries change and evolve. And so again, it's about really sitting down, treating it formally, and having a good resume at the end of the day, but also a very clear strategy on what you do and what you bring to the marketplace.
And Gigs, if we, when we chat to consultants, one of their biggest challenge, going on from what Adam has said, is they decide to take this step. They decide to go independent. And many consultants who may be not used to marketing specific roles, so they might be experts in strategic management or lean consulting, or but they're certainly not marketers. So many guys or people who are wanting to take this step, they simply don't know where to start. Based on your experience, what advice do you have for people who want to switch pace and get themselves started with a marketing perspective?
Well, I think just on a practical level, just to on the previous question that Adam, I just want to add there. I think I always said, really practically, the longer your runway is, the fussier you can be, because inevitably, and that depends on your initial model. How do you get out? How much time do you give yourself to pick and choose, and what do you have to do to keep the lights burning? In terms of specific marketing things, how to switch pace. I think initially when you're branching out on your own, you become the product or the brand or the company. So you got to network, you got to do meetups, you got to use personal contacts. You refer people and you be referred. It's a constant putting yourself out there. It's you've got to work at it and constantly. Sometimes you feel a little bit vulnerable, but you got to put yourself out there. It's the only way, because you are the brand. You are at that point the logo until the business grows. So in that case, then it's really important to know your strengths and the strength of your service and constantly promote it. So use the channels that's available, whether that means social channels, whether it's creating collateral, but whatever you do, make sure it's professional. Rather do less and undertake less, but do it well, because there's this, you'll have this knee-jerk reaction potentially to try and tackle it all, and really focus. And whether you are even if you're an individual working out of your lounge or your garage, and also the Silicon Valley era, the perception of you out there still got to be professional. So whatever you do, whichever channels you use, come across professionally. And then I'd say, know yourself, your skills, your habits, your temperament, but more importantly, be prepared to learn of your industries, because during that process, you'll get stuck if you don't learn. It's you're bringing something to the party by being nimble and being agile, but at the same time, you don't have a vast support network. So you've got to know a lot about a lot of different things. And then one last thing I suppose I'll say about that is you are now, when you run your own business, you're not just a specialist in that particular domain. You are also a salesman, you're also a marketer, and that's part of the learning. You've got to be able to do a lot of other things to keep yourself afloat. You are more than just delivering the service that you are executing on. You're running a business, however small, and so there's a lot of other skills that go with that.
It's true. You don't have the luxury anymore of an accounting department who does the invoicing for you, or that anymore. You've got to become you've got to be agile if you want to learn, take this on. Adam, anything to add to what Giggs has mentioned in terms of how someone who is not typically a marketer gets themselves up to speed quickly?
Well, I think maybe just to build upon what Giggs said, because I think he nailed a lot of it. And it's just, one, you are the product, and you always are the product, which means just about every interaction you have from that point on, you're representing your business and your brand, and you'll be shocked at actually where business opportunities come from. I've had more than a few very interesting work opportunities just come from having drinks with old colleagues, business school buddies, things like that, where you're not there per se to have a business discussion, but it turns out they work for a large organization and they have a problem that you can solve. Those are the sort of things you've got to stay alert to at all times. Similarly, going into a pre-planned meeting with something to talk about is important, but you've got to be ready to pivot. Two of the largest projects I'd ever worked on had absolutely nothing to do with what the original sales pitch was about. It was just, we got to the end of the meeting, they said, look, that's a really great idea, but our problem right now is this. Can you help us? And, again, if you've got that trusted relationship with that person, they will mention these things. And yeah, then you've got to scramble and come back with a response to that pitch, but that's a good problem to have. You're scrambling for good work. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. And if we're staying with you for a sec, so let's talk business development for a second. As Giggs was saying, you have to become salesman, you've got to become marketer, you've got to become accountant. So let's talk about business development. And as a newly established independent consultant, what you mentioned your network, but what other biggest opportunities have you had that have helped you find business or your next project lead, for example?
Well, before we get to that, I do want to say one thing, which is get a good accountant. Get to know a lawyer or two. Don't try and do it all yourself, because you won't do it as well as they can, and it's not that expensive. It's worth having a discussion or two. So that's absolutely advice I give to everyone.
Good point.
But moving on that, at the end of the day, at least for me, most of my business has come through personal relationships. And so it has been a long career of building up people that do trust my advice. And even if I can't solve their problem, I try and help them, put them in touch with the right person, provide value one way or another. And so, I do have a lot of coffees with people. I do drink a lot of beers with people just to understand where they are and what they're up to. And that does, in a lot of cases, involve me passing on work that wouldn't be right for me. But one, that helps the potential client who might think of me in the future. And two, it helps another potential consultant who might think of me in the reverse. And again, it's building that relationship with people that are willing to work with you, that trust you, and consider you an asset to whatever that they're doing.
And Adam, I want to just stay with you on that point for a second before I go over to Giggs. Obviously this idea of a strong network is critical, and a lot of independent consultants that I've certainly spoken to have had the same experience where it's who it's they've spent a lot of their time building that network. And it's also something that can't be fabricated or bought. A lot of people think, well, maybe I should just buy data and start sending mass emails out. And if you find yourself as someone who may not have a strong network, how do you start something like that? Where would you start? Thinking about the person who has never thought they'd necessarily move independent and suddenly find themselves thinking, all right, well, how do I build this strong network? I might not have that luxury. Where would you think they would necessarily start with something like that?
Well, I think a lot of times people actually don't catalog their assets appropriately, because people will often be surprised at how many, I hate to call them resources, but how many people they've met in their life that could help them along their way. And will also be surprised when you reach out to old friends and colleagues. Actually, most people do just want to help. So go back as far as you can and list out everyone that you've worked with and that more importantly has a good opinion of you and believes that you've got integrity. Because I think at its core, you want to be that person that they know will give them the answer they need, not necessarily the answer they want to hear. And just start calling people. It's hard. It is a lot of work, especially for people who may be more introverted, people who don't like doing that networking and whatnot. I know people don't really necessarily believe it anymore, but I used to be very, very introverted years ago and spent a lot of time focused on building the skills to go out and just talk with people. And that's was part of my personal development. Something that I recommend for everyone is just focus on how you can get out there and be comfortable calling up someone that you worked with 5 years ago that the outcome was good, but you haven't talked with in a long time. The worst thing that they do is don't call you back. There's literally no downside to that. So don't undervalue what you actually have as an asset base, would be my point on that.
And I suppose, the likes of social media kind of help you develop that platform even more, whether your choice is LinkedIn or, whatever it might be. It's a great place to start so that you can start documenting that. Giggs, I want to come over to you for a second. So what you've, obviously carrying on from what you've heard Adam speak about, what specific marketing activity would you suggest people use to build their own personal sales pipeline?
So I know we've mentioned the word networking, hundreds of times probably already just today, but I can't overemphasize that enough. I think it's critical. I think an important part of networking is that it's a relationship that works both ways. So your network will give. You'll be surprised at the generosity of people, because we're all in this. But I think it works two ways. At some point, you also need to contribute. I think the analogy is a little bit like your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed. The more you are involved and curate, the better your returns are going to be. The more interesting your feed's going to be. And in the same way, business and when you network, people will contribute, but at some point you have to have some skin in the game. But it's a constant process. I think another practical example is, especially if you move into the consulting space, you are positioning yourself as an expert. So you should have a voice. And that voice can take many, different formats. You can, whether it's a blog or a podcast or, you're tweeting or a series of interviews, and try and get that, into slots on media. I think there's lots of opportunities if you're creative and a little bit innovative. You essentially want to position yourself as a thought leader, because as a consultant, that's one of the key things that you bring into any client is some expertise. So you want to bring that to the forefront. So that's something practical you can look for. I think also look for spillover work from this network or this, your supplier network. Even I said, we've even in the past, I've received work via the supplier network where they went, these guys, we spoke to them and we can't deliver it, but we know you can. And it's because there was this reciprocal relationship. And I think so you do that until your sales funnel is established. So you look for work from other agencies, from your suppliers, from other consultants. And then, you kind of try and be proactive and create work. I think when you first start out, you maybe have a little bit more time because you still have, unless you're fortunate enough to leave your employment with clients intact, and so you've got a canvas for clients. So you create work. You look at where can you add value to businesses or processes, or and you start making recommendations. And sometimes you give a little bit of advice for free, and people take you for a ride. But it's part of trying to generate business. So you can actively. Don't sit and wait for it to come in. You can actively do a little bit of work up front and try and sell that onto people. Tell them, show them the value. Yeah.
And I mean, it's looking at it's long-term vision, isn't it? You said sometimes you have to do a bit of pro bono work, but I suppose you find that you do start to learn what how much you invest personally into something that might show rewards or reap benefits in the long run. So it's good to start identifying that balance from the start. Adam, I wanted to just talk about practicality for a second. So, consultants might say, right, so what do I need? Do I need to build a website? Do I need to have a Twitter and LinkedIn profile? Do I need to attend networking events? Practically, what would you say are the critical things, even just from your own experience, that a consultant should focus on when they're looking to build their own brand?
Well, I think number one, you've got to remember that it's not one size fits all. It's going to be heavily tailored to, I think, the service that you're offering. If you're a digital specialist or, say, a web user experience specialist, obviously you need to have a website that showcases those skills. If you're doing more strategy work and kind of corporate restructuring, you can't necessarily put that online as much, and so it's more than about the personal relationships and the networking. So as part of kind of your initial planning when you're going out, take a look at what other consultants in your space are doing. Do you need to have your website put together? Fine, do that. Do you need to have your Twitter feed put together? Fine, do that. For me, it was a lot more about, okay, I need to join the right kind of membership groups. I need to join the right clubs. I need to talk to the right people to get into that type of advisory work. It's entirely dependent upon what you're offering and how do you get to that right target customer. One thing I would add, though, is do talk to a lot of the small consulting groups out there. A lot of them will often get projects that are too big for them or they can't staff up immediately. And if you can be at least at the forefront of some of their minds when they say, oh shoot, we need another warm body. Well, that's just another channel that actually you don't even have to sell anymore. If you're reasonably friendly with a few small consulting shops, they may bring you work on a regular basis. And I found that to be very helpful myself as well. So.
That's great practical advice, actually. Giggs, as we start to draw to a close, just in your own experience, can you give us any examples where you've seen, people marketing activities or things that people have done, self-employed people have done, or even yourself, that has meant that you've been able to stand out from the crowd and build, through a brand that you've developed yourself?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's many examples of people doing great work out there, often kind of under the radar because the the real successful startups that receive venture capital, they're kind of the ones that get into the spotlight. But I think there's a lot of guys doing a lot of good things. And so, just as an example, I mean, I've got a designer friend whose services we used extensively. And so, as an example, I've seen how he's built his profile and his portfolio over time. So he started off doing, work that maybe wasn't the kind of work he wanted to do, but he started off doing work. He took work from agencies, people like myself. He took work from people that was bound geographically in his area, so very niche. But all the time, he was building his online profile. So on platforms such as TalMix, where so building his ratings and his recommendations. And so it was building towards a kind of a position where you could accept work that interests him from around the world. And that's what he's doing today. I mean, it takes dedication. But today he can pick and choose a lot more. His record speaks for itself. It takes time. It takes a plan, a very loose plan. You gotta have the end goal in sight, but you gotta. I think you used the word pivot, Adam. You gotta be a bit flexible within that. But there's no replacement for good old-fashioned blood, sweat, and tears. And I think that's an advantage you've got because it's so personal to you. You hear people say, they talk about my business, not a business that I started, and it's a personal thing. And so you drive that constantly, and that's a big advantage you've got over a big corporate. So yeah, that's a strength. But I mean, I can cite. There's loads of examples. I think there's lots that just don't get the spotlight.
And Adam, any practical examples that you can share from your time, being independent, or that you've seen in the business?
Well, I think for me, just the most important thing to remember is everyone started somewhere. All the big companies started somewhere. Yeah. Almost all of them were just a couple of guys getting out there and starting to offer a service. And today maybe you get to grow to a very large multinational, or maybe you just get bought out by one.
Yeah.
But just keep in mind that it's hard, and as Giggs has said, it's blood, sweat, and tears, but it's done, and it's done regularly. So don't let it get you down, because it will be hard at times, but it is worth it in the long run.
And while we are with you, final thoughts, any final last bits of advice that you can give, Adam, to someone who is either considering going independent or has already taken the plunge and is thinking, now what?
Say yes. If it's a ridiculous client, if it's something that's a bit of a stretch, if it's something that might just be a lot of fun to do and expand your knowledge base, say yes. That's part of the benefit of working for yourself, is you do get to chart a path that is, in my mind, much better than just being a big corporate drone. I hate to say that, but there's a lot of fun opportunities out there.
Awesome. Giggs, any final thoughts from you?
I'm reminded of we wrote 3 words on a simple A4 piece of paper and stuck it above the kitchen in the office, and it just said simple, sincere, and repetitive. And it's not mine originally. I heard it from somebody in a speech, but we operated business that way. It worked for me and for my clients, the team, suppliers. If you keep things simple, don't overcomplicate it. Life's complicated enough. But be sincere in what you do, care about what you do, and then it's a recipe of just keep on doing it, because you will improve as you repeat.
Great. I might have to write that down myself and stick it above my desk. That's a good theory. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I see we are just on 5 o'clock. Beautiful timing. Thank you so much for both of your times. I appreciate you guys are both very busy, so I thank you very much for your thoughts. For our audience that have been watching, if you would like to rewatch this broadcast, as I said, it will be up on the TalMix website and on the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel. So feel free to go and rewatch it there and share the link to any fellow consultants who are also facing the same challenge. But remember that we run these broadcasts monthly, so we will be letting you know about our next one coming up for June in the next couple of weeks. So do keep your eye on our social media and on your email inbox. But other than that, Adam, Giggs, thank you so much again for your time. Appreciate it. And to our viewers that watch, thank you for joining us, and we'll catch up with you again next time. Have a wonderful afternoon. Speak to you guys soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.